DELANDRIA by Asali Solomon. The streets of the town could in no way be described as lively during the day, but at night they were even more deserted. The neat brick streets and ornate Victorians resembled the outcome of a pristine little purge. Rumor was that the students occasionally slipped into town after dark, calling at a certain ramshackle house to secure pills or powders too specialized to be found on campus. She almost never saw them. Magna sped as she approached the apartment building on Main Street, which was as desolate as it had been when she'd set out earlier that night. Suddenly a brown and white blur reared up in front of her. Meaning to hit the brake, she stamped on the accelerator. There was a violent, wet, crunching sound, and a scream caught in her throat. With the helpless terror she had felt at the top of roller coasters, she did not stop. Before. It had become a habit for Magna, watching television, drinking wine, and then going for a drive. She and Jamal had ritually drank wine while watching television every night, despite the fact that back then everyone in academia could be heard saying, "Oh, I never watch TV." Since no one in academia ever said, "Oh, I never drink wine," she wondered if they perhaps preferred to sip, staring into the abyss. But eventually, Jamal swore off TV, saying he wasn't getting enough done on his dissertation. Then he gave up drinking. Then he left her. That was when Magna added the drives. It felt healthy to go out into the sharp air after the solo slide into the musty depths of the couch. Tonight she had given herself a quick assessment and decided she was okay to drive. She worried a bit about the fact that she had begun crying unexpectedly at the episode in season 1 when Wallace gets killed. She had not cried the first time she had seen it. But poor Wallace, he had tried so hard to take care of the neighborhood kids, even though he was just a kid himself. Magnus sobbed, remembering when the actor had been a hopeful teenager waiting for the prom on All My Children. Nevertheless, grabbing her keys off the nail by the door, she concluded that she was not drunk, just sad. It was a sad time on this show and in her life. The apartment building, a white colonial, was quiet except for the blare of Mr. Oakley's TV set, which ran constantly, game shows during the day, weather and shopping channels at night. Mr. Oakley's was a very nice stooped old man, the type who looks like a baby, with an open smile. His loud TV and the large NRA bumper sticker on his car were the only problems with him as a neighbor. Magna never saw or heard anybody else in the building. She often wondered if she and Mr. Oakley were actually just roommates. The landlord was an upbeat, platinum-haired woman who lived elsewhere and suggested that Magna use old-fashioned elbow grease on the thick coatings of birdsheet that had covered their back window and porch since before she'd moved in that summer. Once outside, Magna inhaled the night. The stars looked crowded and close. God's own country, she'd always said to Jamal when they saw something pretty in this new town, which was often. She felt grateful to him for accompanying her to this hellhole and was anxious to highlight its meager charms. It was true that even the dump had a pastoral allure. God's own country, she'd said among the soiled mattresses and splintered wood where they'd come to bring a broken IKEA shelf that she shouldn't have packed in the first place. He had laughed that time, holding his nose. After a couple of weeks, she'd known it was becoming annoying, but she couldn't stop saying it. That's becoming a tic, he'd said. You say that about everything that gets on your nerves, she'd said. Or maybe you have a lot of tics. Before he left, she and Jamal had sat on the second floor back porch amid the bird shit, and he had declared that the night sky was the only thing he would really miss. Oh, and her, of course. Of course he'd miss her. Then he'd actually attempted a kiss. This was just after he'd announced that he was going back to California, where they'd been graduate students, because he felt like there was something special with Ananda and just had to figure everything out. He clarified that he wasn't breaking up with Magna at all, just putting things on pause. Instead of meeting his lips, Magna had put up an elbow, which he didn't see because his eyes were closed, shirred his face, and was not sorry. Sometimes it was hard to remember why she had been with Jamal. Mostly, he was the prototype of the bad boyfriend in a Tyler Perry movie. But then she would remember. He was handsome, smart, black, and well lotioned, the most undeniable man Magna had ever dated, like the bad boyfriend in a Tyler Perry movie. He had been several cuts above the other men in her graduate program. They were head cases. This one pretending to be gay to get closer to straight women. This one who had written all of his coursework essays about feces. This one wearing an undershirt to class, approaching undergrads in pain, all saying, "Can I holler at you for a minute?" Jamal, on the other hand, was beloved by everyone and lived on secret fellowships that only the secretary and the department chair, and eventually Magna, knew about.